So basically, the world that you experience, your subjective reality at all times, is this model. It's a model that's being constructed by your, what I call your world building machinery, which is the cortex, the outer layer of your brain, and other parts of the brain as well, but particularly the cortex. So all of the structure, the content, the dynamics, everything that you experience in your world is represented by patterns of neural activity in your cortex. So your brain is, you never know whether the world that you experience kind of maps one-to-one, so to speak, with what's actually out there. We never have access to the noumenal world, what Immanuel Kant called the noumenon, the world in itself. We never have access to that. We only have access to the phenomenon, which is the phenomenal world, the world that you experience, your subjective world. And that's a model constructed by your brain as basically as a model of the environment. Our brains evolved to facilitate our survival and reproduction in the environment, whatever the nature of the environment is, and so that's really the purpose of the world that we experience, is to allow us to navigate and survive and flourish and hopefully pass on our genes to the next generation. That's the purpose of this model. But it's always a model. The brain doesn't care whether it's true, so to speak, has no way of measuring or knowing whether it's true. It simply knows that it works, that it's adaptive. And so when you go to sleep at night and when you dream, for example, your brain is constructing a model in the same way that it does when you are awake. It's a model that's disconnected from the environment, but it's normally a model that's built in exactly the same way. And in fact, normally it's a continuation of the normal waking world. People have studied dreaming for centuries really, but scientifically people have studied dreaming for many decades, and we know that most people dream about fairly mundane things. They dream about talking on the telephone, they dream about watching TV, they dream about doing their everyday lives. It gets weird and things shift and change, but it's the same model. Your brain is building the world, if you like, that it learned to and evolved to construct in normal waking life. The difference is that in normal waking life, your brain has access to sensory inputs from the environment, so visual information, so light, patterns of sound, etc., that it can use to kind of test its model. See, the world you experience is always the model. You never have direct access to the outside world, but you do have access to these patterns of sensory stimulation that the brain is basically using to make predictions about its model. Basically, so the world you experience in all waking life is a model that's constantly being tested against sensory information. So it's constrained, if you like, by sensory inputs, but the world we experience is always this model. So when you take a psychedelic, what's happening is the psychedelic is getting into the brain, it's binding to these particular types of receptors, these serotonin 5-HT2A receptors specifically, certainly with the classic psychedelics, and it is disrupting that model. It's changing that model. It's making the model more fluid, more dynamic, much more sensitive to sensory inputs, and that is the psychedelic state. The psychedelic state is a change in this world model that your brain is constructed. It also changes your self model. So your brain also constructs a model of yourself as opposed to the environment, as opposed to the other. So that is also disrupted as well with psychedelics, which is where you get this sense of ego dissolution. Your sense of self starts to dissolve, and also there's a loss of differentiation between yourself and the environment. So you get this what's called oceanic boundlessness, where you feel like you are one with the entire universe, because there isn't that clear differentiation. between yourself and the environment. So with the classic psychedelics, with LSD, with psilocybin, with mescaline, etc., it's like a perturbation of that your normal waking world model. The model changes, and the degree to which it changes will often depend upon dosage. If you take a low dose of psilocybin mushrooms, it might be, things might seem more fluid, objects might start to shift and change their identity before your eyes, and colors might seem brighter, and there's just a change in the structure and dynamics of your experienced world. The model is changing. But with DMT, so I describe it like, it's like the classic psychedelics, they nudge the dial just out of tune a little bit. But with DMT, what happens is that the model is completely obliterated. And it's like you've found a completely new channel. The brain stops constructing the normal waking world model in its entirety. It's gone. And suddenly starts to construct this entirely novel, completely alien, really. Let's face it, that's what it is. It's a completely alien model. It's a completely different world model. Your brain is constructing an entirely different world that bears no relationship whatsoever to the normal waking world, to the world that your brain evolved to construct. So that's kind of very difficult to explain. Your brain wasn't dropped to earth being able to construct a world model, a model of the environment. It took millions of years. From the moment you're dragged from your mother's womb, your brain is sampling sensory information from the environment and using it to find patterns and to start to construct objects and relationships and learning to build the world. It takes a long time. It's not an easy thing to do. And so somehow, when you perturb the brain with DMT, suddenly the brain's with crisp, incredible efficiency suddenly becomes capable of constructing these worlds that are crystalline clarity, incredibly dynamic and intricate, infinitely detailed, higher dimensional, filled with these beings, with these coherent narrative structure. It's like the best movie you've never seen or could possibly see being created in real time by your brain. Despite it bearing no relationship to the world that your brain evolved to construct. It's like your brain is suddenly switched to speaking an entirely different language that has no relationship to English. If you think about it in terms of language, it's like your brain is suddenly speaking fluent Siberian Yupik, having never been exposed to that language. That would be confounding, of course, if that happened to a child or something, a British child or an American child. But in a way, that's what your brain is doing. It suddenly starts constructing these incredibly intricate and dynamic and highly complex, hyperdimensional worlds filled with these, incredible alien beings. It's like, I'm sorry, that is not easy to explain. It's not. You can't simply say, oh, it's just hallucinations. The brain is just making it up, because there are limits to what the brain can make up. And so, I think that's the central problem with DMT is our inability to explain, in my opinion anyway, how the brain is able to construct these realities that are so different to the normal waking world with such adroit, with such effortless precision and ability. And it's a remarkable thing. Unless there is some kind of alternate sensory information input, just as the normal waking world is normally modulated and constrained by sensory information from the environment, is the brain picking up, or is information being inputted into your brain from somewhere else, from some other domain? I don't want to say where it is or what it is or its origins or anything like that, but that's what it seems like to me. It seems like you can only explain DMT if there is some alternate source of information inputs that is directing, if you like, the construction of this alternate world model.